there, welcome back to Renewable Energy in Canada. Today we'll be joined by Richard to talk about renewable energy in Canada. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. So, Richard, I was wondering if before we got to the juicy stuff, you could just explain what renewable energy is.
Of course, Franklin. So pretty much, renewable energy is the use of natural resources that don't run out because of overuse, but instead are always either regenerating or being put through a cycle.
Interesting. Could you give us an example of that?
For sure. Now, there are many types of renewable energy. These include solar, thermal, geothermal, hydro, tidal, biomass, as well as many more that just aren't as popular or accessible. What I mean by not as accessible is that depending on where you are will really restrict which renewable energy source you can use. For example, if you live in the desert, hydro is most likely not your best route. An example of the cycle part would also be hydro, because in the case of a dam, we use the flowing water to spin a turbine and then release that water back into a spot where it is accessible for us to reuse, hence the reusable part.
Very interesting. So what is Canada doing for reusable energy, or just energy in general?
Glad you asked, Franklin, because Canada actually gets most of its energy from water.
Really?
Yeah, around 60% of Canada's electrical energy is powered by hydro, and very little to none of that by geothermal and tidal, which also use water and turbines to generate power, most of it by dams and river turbines. Now, it is true Canada has the third largest oil supply, as well as an abundance of other fossil fuels, such as coal, yet only 19% of electrical energy is produced by fossil fuels.
Now, 19% of an entire country has to be a pretty big number. Richard, is there any way to lower that, if possible? And if so, how would we do that?
Well, Franklin, there is a way to reduce that number, and it would have to involve the Canadian government to take a bit of a risk and invest in things such as a geothermal power plant or a tidal setup. Both of these would be risky moves due to the little we know about them and how expensive they are compared to how much of a risk they would be. But if planned out, it would save Canada millions of dollars in fossil fuels and really help save the environment because of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
Now, I don't know if you watch a lot of the news, but there has been a lot about Iceland and how it's the first ever energy-dependent country. And I was wondering, could Canada ever be like that?
Well, as a matter of fact, Iceland is a 100% renewable energy dependent country. Near to all of that comes from geothermal energy. They use it because of the abundance of geysers and glaciers they have. Could Canada ever be like Iceland? Well, that's a difficult question, Frank. Canada does not have the capability to produce geothermal energy to the same degree at the moment due to uncertainty of this particular type of energy in Canada and financial difficulties. However, over time, it is possible Canada could use other types of energy to reach this level of efficiency. In specific, Canada could start to utilize mainly tidal and wind sources, as there is such an abundance of this. The southern prairies, the St. Lawrence region, and offshore sites could greatly contribute to 100% renewable energy Canada. As far as tidal goes, Canada has the largest coastline in the world, and if we could utilize this coastline, it would be a large contributor. We can learn a lot from Iceland. They have started to pave the way for more renewable energy usage in the world.
That's interesting. But is this even feasible in Canada? In other words, could Canada produce this much renewable energy?
Excellent question. In Canada, we use the most energy per capita out of any country. However, Canada has so much landmass that this easily makes up for our energy consumption. Once again, I will be zooming in on tidal, wind, and hydro. As far as hydro goes, we are doing great producing this type of energy, as just under 60% of our energy comes from hydro sources. As a matter of fact, in 2014, 378.8 terawatt hours were produced solely from hydro plants. For wind, around 6% of Canada's energy comes from wind. This industry is rapidly growing, and the Canada Wind Energy Association has constructed a strategy so that as of 2025, 20% of Canada's energy will be coming from wind sources. As mentioned before, the main places for wind energy are offshore sites, the St. Lawrence region, and the Southern Prairies. For tidal, an example to use would be that on Vancouver Island, if they were to install a singular 500 megawatt facility, it would power about 15% of the island. The reason we aren't doing this is because the grid wouldn't be able to handle this much power. Another reason tidal energy isn't being used is because the majority of Canada's coastline isn't near a grid. This makes it extremely difficult and inconvenient to transport and use the energy. But in my opinion, Canada could be doing a better job utilizing the coastline near grids. And if the grid can't handle the energy pouring into it, we should do our best to make sure it can. As there is only one tidal energy station in all of Canada, in Fundy Bay, Nova Scotia, we can do a better job harnessing the power of the ocean and use it for energy.
Nah, that's a lot of info. Thank you so much for the interview, Richard.
Thanks for having me, Frank. I really think everyone needs to know about renewable energy situation in Canada, as it could be a very important part of our country and even our world's future.
Hey!